Hey, it's Vanessa Vaughn, the founder and chief resilience officer of Asfalis Advisors. We're here for another episode for the Crisis Corner Cafe. This week, we're talking about mass shootings at government facilities. And again, these conversations are designed for leaders who are responsible for managing risk, whether you work in private, industry, nonprofit, or government. If you're responsible for managing risk, this conversation is for you. So you may be general counsel, you may be human resources, you may be the head of safety and security, risk management, the city manager, the county manager, the operating officers, or the executive leadership team within your organization. This dialogue and this informal video is meant for you. So I want to begin with the end in mind, but first what I thought would be a good place to start is I'm actually from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I grew up 5 miles from where the shooting took place. My mom actually used to work in that same building. And so as I talked to her yesterday, one of her thoughts was, if I was still an employee, I may have been there on that day. And the town where the shooter lived is actually where we went to church. And it really hits home for my family, for the community, and for those in the Virginia Beach area. Additionally, I was born at the hospital where many of the victims of that particular shooting went. And so this is a community effort, right? Something happened at a local government facility. It took local first responders and resources, and then it took our hospital experts and advisors to help on that end as well. And so these are things that I want you to kind of think about as it relates to whatever crisis may happen at your company or in your facility. It's a shared effort. It's a shared responsibility. We like to begin with the end in mind. And so, 12 people died. Number 13 was the actual shooter. Many of the people who passed away were employees of the city of Virginia Beach. And one was a contractor who was literally there just to file a permit and happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. The suspect was a city employee at the time of the shooting. Many of the headlines also state that he actually resigned hours before the shooting. But according to his neighbors, to those who sat on local boards with him in his community neighborhood, and those who worked with him, was that he had a good reputation. He stayed to himself. He was a good guy, and he never gave off some type of negative, disgruntled vibe. And he was a good standing employee. So it really, really begs us to kind of think about, well, then what happened? Like, why would you snap at that level and then take it out on people at your workplace? And before he died, there was actually a shootout between him and the police, and it resulted in the shooter's life. So typically I would ask, what's the impact on the business community? But what I really want to do today is focus on the people, because I always say, if you don't have people, you don't have a business. And this ties back into our company culture. And one of the things that I read about is that people can actually bring guns in the city of Virginia Beach. People can actually bring guns into public buildings. However, they cannot bring them into schools or courtrooms. And the question that comes to my mind is, well, why? What is the need of someone having a gun at a local government building? What does that solve? What are we creating? What is the atmosphere that we are trying to create here? Over a period of 10 days, research says that some who are affected by an active shooter commit suicide, especially those who experience them at schools. About 28% of people who survive mass shootings in the United States develop post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you're in the US, most times we hear of PTSD from a military perspective, those who may have experienced war and who may have seen traumatic things. But now that we're experiencing this in our schools, in our daycare facilities, at our yoga studios, at grocery stores, at work, at entertainment venues, PTSD is spreading to not just include the military personnel, but also people who we live and work with every single day. These traumatic symptoms then interfere with the resolution of the grief process and how we all react and respond to that. And that typically results in what we call survivor's guilt, where people feel bad that I'm here. People feel bad that I survived. People feel bad that I couldn't stop this particular shooter. And they kind of internalize that process, and that becomes what, again, we call survivor's guilt. So overall, though, people who have a good social support system, people who do not have a history of mental health problems or other traumatic experiences are most likely to experience resiliency as it relates to responding and recovering from an active shooter situation. And one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting is that eventually this sense of community actually goes away, right? So for some people, it may take you 2 weeks. It may take you 3 months. It may take you 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years to fully grieve and to process being involved in an active shooter. But for some people, it takes longer. And the challenge is what are we doing to make sure that once these things happen, that there's actually a process and a way to make sure that we are constantly supporting people and giving them the resources that they need. So one of the things that I want you, or many of the things that I want you guys to consider is, how do you get to know your employees in your work environment? What's your culture like? You know, if we say that we honor people and that, you know, we're a great place to work, is that truly embedded down to the every level within the organization, from your managers to their direct reports? How do you hold people accountable in your company? How do you truly get to know people? Are you on the front line? Do you talk to them? Do you know when that person is going through something? At the end of the day, we are people. And sometimes we get so ahead of ourselves and want to focus on business and results and where we're going, but we forget that we're people. Who on your team is really trained to do so? I oftentimes run into organizations where, oh, that's the job of HR. But did you really equip HR with the resources that they need to be successful? Or did you throw them in the seat because that's what their function says? Have you equipped them with the necessary tools? What types of trainings do you put your HR teams through? Those are things that you really need to think about, because this is clearly not a game. People are coming into companies and to schools for whatever reason with all types of issues and challenges and problems, and we don't want your company to be next. How does your company look for behaviors, whether they're easily identifiable or not? There's strategies and there's techniques that professionals like ourselves understand how to work through. So the question is, how does your company look for them? If you're not looking for it, you're not solving for it. Like I always say, if I can't see the risk, I can't solve for it. But if you're not strategically looking to identify them, then you're going to miss something. If it were to happen today, if an active shooter were to happen at your company today, right now, where you sit, if you're in a conference room, if you're traveling to your next destination, what is the plan? Who do you talk to? What are you communicating to your workforce? Do you even have a communication system in place? Who's responsible for that? How do you provide support to your workforce 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or 2 years down the line? We all grieve differently. Some cry, some get angry, some get frustrated, some shut down. We all grieve differently. What's your strategy? What's your process to make sure that you're delivering the right support to all of those who may be affected? How do you truly train your employees, whether you're in HR or whether you're frontline? If an active shooter were to happen today, have you properly trained your workforce? Have you done your due diligence to make sure that they know what to do, that they know the exit routes? And like this particular guy, he was an employee, so he had access to where the staff worked. What was their plan? Did anybody communicate that to them ahead of time? When you're working with your facilities and real estate teams and you're going to a new location, do you proactively work with corporate security? Don't design the building and then look for security and safety to solve the problem next. That's reactive. Proactive businesses, proactive leaders who are responsible for managing risks, bring the right people to the table ahead of time to make sure that we're tackling the right problems before these things bubble up into a real crisis. So I've turned it over to you. What do you think? Has this happened to you? Has this happened in your work environment? What has been your response? What are some next practices that you guys are considering? Again, my name is Vanessa Vaughn, the founder and chief resilience officer of Asphalis Advisors. If this is the conversation that you guys have not had inside of your company, or if this is a conversation that you think needs a little bit more push and a little bit more support inside of your company, please hit contact us now and feel free to book us so I can come and be a speaker at your company and talk to your leaders so that you guys make this a priority. Because again, if we don't have people, we don't have a business. Thank you so much for tuning in to Crisis Corner Cafe, and we look forward to seeing you again.